I deliver flowers to hospital rooms. The patient in 405 has received the same bouquet for 30 years. My name is Claire Donovan, and I've been a flower delivery specialist for Mercy General Hospital for the past 8 years. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but there's something deeply meaningful about bringing small moments of beauty into a place where people are fighting their hardest battles. I've delivered celebration bouquets to new mothers, sympathy arrangements to grieving families, and get-well-soon carnations to recovering patients. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my career has ever been quite like the delivery to room 405. My typical Monday morning starts at 7 a.m. at Blossom and Stem, the florist shop that contracts with the hospital. I load up my cart with the day's orders, carefully checking each card against each arrangement. Roses for Mrs. Chen in cardiology, sunflowers for the little boy in pediatrics who just beat leukemia. And then always at the very top of my list, the standing order that has been there longer than I've worked here. White lilies, 2 dozen, room 405, long-term care wing. The order card is simple, typed on what looks like an ancient typewriter. No personal message, just a name, for James, and a signature that's been the same for 3 decades, with eternal regret. I asked about it once, during my first month on the job. My supervisor, Margaret, a woman who'd been at Mercy General for 40 years, just gave me a strange, sad look. "Don't ask questions about 405, honey," she'd said, her voice unusually quiet. "Some stories are too heavy to carry. Just deliver the flowers. That's all any of us can do." That warning, of course, only made me more curious. The patient in room 405, I eventually learned from whispered conversations in the break room, was a man named James Whitmore. He'd been in a vegetative state since 1995. 30 years, 3 decades of machines breathing for him, of nurses turning him to prevent bed sores, of a body that lived, while a mind remained somewhere unreachable. And every single Monday, without fail, those white lilies arrived. I started to notice things. Small, strange things that didn't quite add up. Hey there! Before we continue with this incredible story, I have an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without any warning. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, give me that powerful like that helps me so much with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching this video from? I love getting to know each of the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. Now, where was I? Yes, those strange things I started noticing about room 405. The flowers were always paid for in cash, delivered to the florist shop in a plain white envelope on the 1st of every month. 12 envelopes a year for 30 years. No return address, no name. Just enough money to cover exactly 52 deliveries of white lilies, plus a small tip for the florist. And the handwriting on those envelopes, it was shaky, uneven, like it belonged to someone very old, or someone whose hands trembled with something more than age. It was a Monday morning in late October, the kind of gray, drizzly day that makes the hospital's fluorescent lights seem even more harsh and unforgiving. I was making my usual rounds, my cart squeaking down the long-term care corridor, when I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The door to room 405 was open, not just cracked open, but wide open. And standing in the doorway, staring at the man in the bed, with an expression of such profound, devastating grief that it physically hurt to look at, was an elderly woman I had never seen before. She was small, frail, dressed in an expensive but outdated coat that looked like it was from the 1990s. Her hair was white, pulled back in a neat bun, and her hands, clutching a worn leather purse, were shaking violently. She wasn't crying, she was just staring, her face a mask of such raw, unprocessed pain that I felt like an intruder witnessing something deeply, unbearably private. "Ma'am?" I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you all right?" She turned to look at me, and I saw her eyes. They were pale blue, red-rimmed and filled with a grief so old and so deep it seemed to have carved permanent lines into her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in days. "I shouldn't be here. I promised myself I wouldn't come. But it's been 30 years today. 30 years since." Her voice broke. She looked back at the man in the bed, at James Whitmore's still, silent form. Since I destroyed his life. My heart was pounding. This was her. This had to be her. The woman who sent the flowers. "Are you the one who sends the lilies?" I asked gently. She nodded, a single, jerky movement. "Every week. For 30 years. It's all I can do. It's all I've been able to do." And then she said something that changed everything. "I was driving the car," she whispered. "The night of the accident. I was the one behind the wheel. I should have walked away. I should have delivered my flowers, smiled politely, and moved on with my day. But I couldn't. Something about this woman's grief, about the weight of 30 years of guilt, pulled at me with a force I couldn't resist. "Would you like to sit down?" I asked, gesturing to the small chair beside James's bed. Maybe you could tell me what happened." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face, as if trying to determine whether I was worthy of carrying her story. Then, slowly, she nodded and sank into the chair. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," she began, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of the heart monitor. "James was my husband." I felt my breath catch. Her husband. Not a friend, not a distant relative, her husband. "We were married for 15 years, Eleanor continued, her eyes fixed on James's face. "We were happy, so incredibly happy. We had a beautiful home, good jobs, plans for the future. We were going to start a family." Her voice cracked. "And then, on October 23rd, 1995, I destroyed all of it in a single, stupid, unforgivable moment." She paused, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. We were driving home from a dinner party. It was late, around 11 p.m. The roads were wet from an earlier rain. James wanted to drive, but I insisted. "I'd only had one glass of wine," I said. "I was fine," I said. A bitter, self-loathing laugh escaped her lips. I was so arrogant. So sure of myself. We were on Route 7, about 5 miles from our house. James was in the passenger seat, telling me about a promotion he'd gotten at work. He was so excited, so full of life, and I looked away from the road. Just for a second. Just 1 second to change the radio station because I didn't like the song that was playing. Her voice dropped to a whisper. When I looked back up, there was a deer, right in the middle of the road. I swerved. I overcorrected. The car went off the road, down an embankment, and hit a tree. James's side, the passenger side. It took the full impact. Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and unstoppable. I walked away with a broken arm and some bruises. James's brain was deprived of oxygen for too long before the paramedics arrived. The doctors said he'd never wake up, that the damage was too severe, that the most humane thing would be to let him go. But I couldn't, she said, her voice rising with a desperate, frantic energy. Don't you understand? I couldn't let him die. Not when it was my fault. Not when I was the one who took everything from him. So I kept him alive. I used our savings, sold our house, liquidated everything we had to pay for his care here. And every single week, I sent him flowers. White lilies. They were his favorite. I sat there stunned, my mind trying to process the magnitude of what she was telling me. 30 years. 30 years of guilt so profound it had consumed her entire life. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said gently, have you ever talked to anyone about this? A therapist? A counselor?" She shook her head. "What would be the point? Talking won't bring him back. Talking won't undo what I did. The only thing I can do is make sure he's cared for. That he's not alone. That he knows, somehow, that I'm sorry." And then, as I sat there in that quiet room, watching this woman who had spent 3 decades in a prison of her own making, "Whitmore," I said slowly, "if you've been paying for his care all these years, who's been visiting him? The nurses told me someone comes every night, someone who sits with him and reads to him." Eleanor's face went pale. "What?" she whispered. "That's impossible. I'm the only family he has. His parents are dead. He was an only child. There's no one else." I left Eleanor in the room and went straight to the nurse's station. Brenda, the head nurse on the long-term care floor, was a woman who'd been at Mercy General almost as long as James Whitmore had been a patient. "Brenda," I said, my voice urgent. "Room 405. James Whitmore. Who visits him at night?" She looked up from her computer, surprised by my intensity. "The same person who's been visiting for years, honey. His wife, Eleanor. She comes every night around 8 p.m., stays for about an hour, reads to him from his favorite books." "That's impossible," I said. "I just spoke with Eleanor Whitmore. She told me she hasn't been able to bring herself to visit him. Not once in 30 years. She sends flowers, but she can't face him." Brenda's face went pale. That can't be right. I've seen her. We all have." "She's been coming here for as long as I can remember." We pulled up the visitor logs, and there it was in black and white, a signature every single night for 30 years, Eleanor Whitmore. But when we compared it to the signature on the flower delivery cards, to the signature on the hospital admission papers from 1995, they didn't match. They weren't even close. Someone had been impersonating Eleanor. Someone had been visiting James Whitmore every single night for 3 decades, pretending to be his wife. I ran back to room 405, my heart pounding, but when I got there, Eleanor was gone, and sitting in the chair where she had been, reading aloud from a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, was another woman. She was younger, maybe in her 50s, with dark hair and kind eyes. And when she looked up at me, I saw it. The resemblance. The same nose, the same chin, the same pale blue eyes. "Who are you?" I whispered. She closed the book gently, her hand resting on James's. "My name is Sarah," she said quietly. "Sarah Whitmore. I'm James's daughter." The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity. "Eleanor was pregnant," I said, my voice barely audible. "When the accident happened, she was pregnant." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "My mother gave birth to me 2 months after the accident. She was so consumed by guilt, so destroyed by what she'd done, that she couldn't even look at me. I reminded her too much of him, of everything she'd lost. So my grandmother raised me. And when I was old enough to understand, she told me about my father, about the man in room 405 who would never wake up." "And you've been visiting him," I said, pretending to be Eleanor. "I wanted him to know he wasn't alone," Sarah whispered. "I wanted him to know that he was loved, that he mattered. My mother couldn't give him that, so I did." At that moment, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She'd heard everything. Mother and daughter stared at each other across the room, across 30 years of pain and silence and unspoken love. And then, slowly, Eleanor walked forward. She reached out a trembling hand and touched her daughter's face, for what I realized might have been the first time in decades. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor whispered. "I'm so sorry." James Whitmore died 3 weeks later. It was peaceful, the doctor said. His body had simply decided, after 30 years, that it was time to let go. Eleanor and Sarah were both there, holding his hands when he took his last breath. The funeral was small, just the two of them, a handful of hospital staff who'd cared for him over the years. And me. Eleanor asked me to bring one final bouquet of white lilies. I did. In the months that followed, I watched something beautiful happen. Eleanor and Sarah began to heal. They started having coffee together, then lunch, then long, tearful conversations that stretched into the night. 30 years of lost time couldn't be recovered, but they could build something new, something honest. Eleanor stopped sending the weekly flowers, not because she'd forgotten James, but because she'd finally forgiven herself. He wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life in a prison of guilt, she told me one day. He'd want me to live, to know my daughter, to find some measure of peace. I still work at Mercy General. I still deliver flowers every Monday morning. But now, when I pass by room 405, which houses a new patient with their own story, their own struggles, I think about the weight of guilt, the power of forgiveness, and the incredible, resilient strength of love that endures even in the darkest of circumstances. Eleanor taught me that sometimes the heaviest burdens we carry are the ones we place on ourselves. And sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's learning, finally, to let go.